There's a particular kind of silence in a house once filled with children. It's not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of memory. That's what lingers. The squeak of the floorboard outside the bathroom, the laugh that used to come from the den when Matthew watched cartoons too loud, the clatter of cereal bowls in the morning when no one could find the right spoon. I hear those sounds even now when I sit at the kitchen table sipping tea I've already reheated twice. It's habit, I suppose, setting out 2 mugs instead. Of one, folding towels I won't use, listening for a door that hasn't opened in months. I used to think it would come back. The noise, the closeness, the family I gave everything for. They promised me this house would always be mine. Not in legal terms, but in love, in gratitude, in the soft, assured voices that used to say, "You'll always be with us, Mom," or "You'll never be alone." I clung to those words like a coat in winter. When Matthew and Isla said they were moving back in temporarily, just until they saved enough for a deposit on a house, I didn't hesitate. I dusted off the guest room, cleared closet space, even bought fresh linens with little embroidered bluebirds on them. Illa liked birds. I remembered that from the first time she came to dinner, picking at her salad, complimenting the folded napkins I'd pressed that morning. She'd been soft then, polite, a little cool around the edges, like she was calculating everything I said and placing it on a scale. But I smiled through it. That's what mothers do, and Matthew, well, he was always my heart. When he was little, he used to crawl into bed beside me after a nightmare. He'd tug at my nightgown and whisper, "Just for a little while, Mama." He never said Mom. Back then, I liked that. It's made me feel like I mattered. I suppose that's why I believed him when he said, "We'll take care of you now. You don't have to worry about a thing." I'd just come out of surgery on my hip. The scar was still tender, and walking felt like dragging a tree branch through gravel. I didn't like how slow I'd become, how the steps had turned into an ordeal. But I smiled when he said it, tears pricking behind my eyes, because I thought, just maybe I wouldn't have to be afraid of what came next. They moved in that spring. The house filled again, not with noise, but with movement. Ilse's carefully neutral furniture, all creams and soft woods. Their soft hum of music late at night, different from the old jazz records I used to play with Richard, my husband's. Voice was still in some of those grooves. No one asked to hear them. Still, I adjusted. I made room in the pantry for their snacks. Gave Isla my recipe box when she said she wanted to start experimenting with more traditional meals. I stopped using the oven around dinner time. She liked things done her way. And I didn't want to intrude. Instead, I would take my dinner on a tray to the small sunroom that used to be Richard's study. I'd eat slowly, listening to the birds outside the screen, tracing the veins in the old wallpaper with my eyes. I didn't mind. Not really. Told myself this was just part of growing old, letting the next generation take over. And when they told me they had good news, I believed them. I remember that morning clearly, early October. He's just beginning to scatter the lawn like forgotten confetti. Matthew called me into the kitchen, his eyes bright with that same spark I used to see when he was 5 and built something out of blocks. Isla stood beside him, her hands resting on her stomach in a way that told me everything before the words even came. They were having a baby, my first grandchild, I cried, of course, quietly into the sleeve of my cardigan. I held Illa's hand and told her how much it meant to me. I made a little quilt that night, soft flannel with tiny ducks, even though my fingers cramped from the cold. I dreamed of the child's, laughter echoing through the hallways, of soft footsteps and small hands wrapped around my own. I saw myself in those future days, rocking the baby in the chair I'd kept in the attic all these years. The same one I used for Matthew when he wouldn't sleep unless he was on my chest. The hope wrapped around me like a blanket. They said they'd like to make the house more baby-friendly, maybe do some renovations. Said yes to everything. Take down the curtains. Fine. Repaint the nursery, of course. Whatever you need. And when Ela said they were thinking about formalizing some of the ownership details, it's just to help with the mortgage approval, that it was really just a formality. I didn't blink. "We'll still all be here together," she said. Her smile, thin but practiced. "It's just so we can move forward," Matthew added. His hand on mine. I nodded because I trusted them, because I wanted to believe that family meant something. Still, I began making lists, names for the baby, meals to freeze, books I wanted to read to them someday. I ironed the lace doilies I'd nearly thrown out last year, thinking maybe they'd look nice again in a nursery filled with light. I pulled out old photographs to show Isla photos of Matthew in the bathtub, grinning with bubbles in his hair. She smiled but didn't linger. I told myself she was just busy. That pregnancy made people tired, but something had already started to shift. I could feel it in the way Matthew no longer lingered at the kitchen table after dinner, in how Isla began locking the office door, the one that used to be mine, in the way they talked in low tones, just out of earshot, glancing toward me with expressions I couldn't quite name. Still, I clung to the good dot, to the baby on the way, dot, too. The promise that this house would always be mine, to the soft blanket I kept folding and refolding in the evenings, smoothing down the corners even though no one ever asked me to. Hope, I've learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it begs. Sometimes it's just a woman with a cup of cold tea, watching the curtains flutter and wondering why the door stays closed a little longer each day. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to hear an answer. I couldn't undo dot. Instead, I waited. I waited for Isla to ask me to feel the baby kick. She didn't. I waited for Matthew to say, "We couldn't do this without you." He didn't. I waited for the baby shower invitation that never arrived. And still, I kept hope folded neatly, like the quilt in the corner, untouched. But, ready? Because I thought they cared, because they had promised, because I was still waiting for my son to come back to me, not as a man with a mortgage and a wife and a plan, but as the little boy who once told me, "You're my favorite person in the world, Mama." It's funny how memory softens even the harshest truths, at least. At first, it began the way most things end, quietly. The first time I noticed the change, it was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays used to be our day. Matthew and I had this habit even into his adult years. After Richard passed, he started coming by every Tuesday afternoon to sit with me on the porch. He'd bring coffee, ever quite hot enough, and I'd pretend not to mind. We'd talk about nothing really. The traffic, the news, whether the hedges needed trimming. It wasn't about what we said. It was that he came. But after they moved in, those porch visits stopped. I told myself it was just the adjustment. Routines. The baby on the way. I still bought a little extra coffee, though, just in case. Then came the missed phone calls. We used to talk once a day, sometimes twice. Nothing dramatic, just little check-ins. "Did you take your pills? Or did you eat something real, Mom?" I used to laugh when he called me the most stubborn woman alive. Said it with love back then. But after the move, the calls slowed. Then they stopped altogether. Because now we lived under the same roof, didn't we? Why call when I was just down the hall? Except they were always busy. Isla was tired. Isla was working on something. Isla needed rest. I tiptoed around her moods, like I was balancing teacups on my back. I made sure the dishwasher was loaded before she woke up. I started using the laundry room only when I heard her car leaving the driveway. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something softer. Something quieter. The kind of unease you feel when you're walking into a room where your name's already been spoken, but not with kindness. I tried harder. I offered to make dinner, only to be met with tight smiles and quick no-thank-you stop once. I baked a lasagna. Matthew's favorite tan, left it on the counter with a note. That evening, I found the dish untouched and a different takeout container in the trash. I told myself they must have just forgotten. I told myself a lot of things. It helped to remember the older days. When Matthew was small, he used to write me letters from summer camp. Little crooked sentences scrawled in blue ink. "Miss you lots. Mama, I'm okay. Did you feed Oscar?" Oscar was the cat. Long gone now, but I still have those letters. I kept them in a wooden box beneath the bed. Some nights when the silence got too thick, I'd take them out. Just to feel remembered. Isla's belly grew rounder with each passing week. I knitted booties, one pair in each color. Pink, blue, yellow, just in case. I placed them neatly in a wicker basket tied with ribbon. No one noticed Dot once, I asked. If I could help paint the nursery, Viola gave me a long look, then said they had it under control. That same afternoon, I heard them laughing through the door, painting together, music playing. I sat at the bottom of the stairs, listening to the sound of a life I had not been invited into. I smiled to myself, just so I wouldn't cry. Because when you're my age, tears feel foolish. You'll learn to grieve things while standing up, while stirring a pot, while folding the same towel twice. I thought maybe it was just me. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I expected too much at church. I asked my friend Lorraine. Her son had married young too. She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she was willing to say. She patted my hand and said, "The hardest part is realizing they don't need us anymore. But don't take it personal. They still love you. Just ... differently. That word sank into me like a stone in cold water. I started doing things alone. I went to the market by myself, pushing the cart with one hand and holding my hip with the other. I made tea and took it outside. I sat on the bench under the pear tree that Richard planted in '86 and watched the squirrels dig at nothing. I kept busy, or tried to. I rearranged my scarves. I ironed pillowcases no one would ever sleep on. I labeled old photo albums, even though no one had asked. I told myself this was how families evolved, how mothers became background. Still, there were moments that pierced, deeper than others, like the time I stood outside their door. Hoping to hear the baby's heartbeat from the little monitor they'd bought, I paused, hand on the frame, smiling softly to myself. But when I stepped inside, Isla flinched. "Oh, could. You maybe knock next time," I apologized. Stepped back, felt the chill of the hallway wrap around my shoulders. Or the time I brought her a cup of ginger tea, something I used to drink when I was pregnant with Matthew. She looked at it like I'd handed her a rock. "I'm avoiding caffeine," she said, setting it aside. I nodded. Took the cup back with shaking hands. Poured it down the sink. It's strange how rejection can sound polite, civil, even reasonable. But you feel it all the same. After that, I started closing my own door more. Often, I didn't want to intrude. I didn't want to be the reason Isla sighed when she walked into a room. I didn't want to be a weight. I heard her use that word once, though. Not to me. She didn't know I was coming down the stairs. I paused on the second step when I heard her say, it clear as glass. She's just ... a lot. You know, it's like having another kid here. Can't breathe. Matthew mumbled something back. It's quiet to catch. And then she said it. I just didn't know she'd be so ... needy. She's always around. My heart didn't stop. It didn't break. It just sank. It's like the lasagna. It's like the tea. Like the version of myself I'd been holding on to. Later that night. Stood in the guest bathroom staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was tired. Soft around the edges. The kind of woman people passed in grocery aisles without really seeing. I used to be more than that. I used to have things to say, places to go, a husband who lit candles on Sunday nights just because. I used to matter now. I was becoming ... scenery. They didn't yell. They didn't push me out. But they erased me all the same. With sighs. With silence. With forgetting I existed unless they needed a towel folded, a door unlocked, a reminder to pick up the package from the porch. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I waited again. Like I always had. Waiting for a moment that felt like it would never come. And when the baby came early 3 weeks before the due date, I was the last to know. I woke to an empty house. Their bags gone. The car missing. I made coffee. Sat on the edge of my bed. Stared at the phone. It never rang. Only that afternoon did I see the announcement on Illa's Instagram. A soft filtered photo of a newborn's foot and the caption, "She's here, our hearts are full." No tag, no mention of me, just hundreds of likes and comments from friends and strangers. And somewhere, tucked deep between them, a comment from Isla's cousin that read, "Can't wait to meet her. Will your mom be helping out?" And Isla's reply, "Just us for now, keeping it peaceful." Peaceful. That was the word they used to describe my absence. I didn't cry, I just stood up. Walked to the fridge and threw out the little cake I had baked the night before. Lemon sponge. Isla's favorite. She'd never taste it. No, I even tried. I wiped the counter, folded the towel over the sink rail. Then I sat down and I stayed there for a long, long time. Some betrayals don't arrive loudly. They seep in like a slow leak behind a wall. You don't notice the damage at first, not until the paint begins to bubble. And everything underneath is already ruined. It had been 3 weeks since the baby was born. 3 weeks of closed doors, muffled footsteps, and a kind of careful avoidance. That felt deliberate. I hadn't been asked to hold her, hadn't been asked to help, not even once. They came back from the hospital late one evening, slipped inside like ghosts. No knock on my door, no update. Just the sound of drawers opening and shutting in the nursery. The quiet rustle of packaging being unwrapped. And then silence. I baked a batch of muffins that first morning, blueberry, the kind Matthew used to love. I placed them in a basket lined with a clean towel and left them outside the nursery door with a handwritten note. No one said a word. The basket returned that night, empty. Not of muffins, but of acknowledgement. I took it back to the kitchen, washed it carefully, and placed it in the cupboard. I stopped trying after that. Days grew colder. I stayed mostly in my room with the radio on low and a shawl wrapped around my shoulders. I found an old box of puzzles and began working my way through them piece by piece. I didn't ask questions. I didn't knock. I tried to pretend I hadn't. Noticed they were avoiding me. Then came the receipt. It was nothing at first, just a slip of paper left on the counter. A crumpled thing with Isla's handwriting in the corner. I picked it up without thinking, smoothing it out. It was from a furniture store. A crib, a rocking chair, wall decals, curtains, a designer lamp shaped like a fox, all delivered. All paid for by my credit card. I froze. The number was mine. I recognized the last 4 digits. I recognized the charge amount, even though I hadn't used the card in weeks. I checked my purse to be sure. The card was still there, still tucked in my wallet, still mine. The air left the room in one slow exhale. I gripped the counter with one hand, the receipt in the other. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed to be sure. That evening, while they were out walking the baby, I opened my laptop. It had dust. On the lid, I hadn't touched it in months. I logged into the bank, and there it was. Transaction after transaction. Not just the crib, not just the lamp, but groceries, spa treatments, a hair appointment, baby clothes from upscale boutiques I'd never even heard of. Delivery orders, fancy ones, too. More than I ever spent on myself in a month. All charged to me over $2,000. I sat there, the screen casting a blue glow on my face, and felt something hollow stretch wide in my chest. They hadn't asked, they hadn't even told me. They'd just taken, quietly, easily, as though it was nothing at all. I printed the statements. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to hold something. Maybe I needed proof that I hadn't imagined it. I placed the pages in a folder and tucked them inside my nightstand, and then I waited 2 days later. I overheard Isla on the phone. I was coming up the stairs. Her voice drifted from their room, light and amused. It's not like she even uses that account. What's the point of it just sitting there? A pause? A laugh? No, she has no idea. She probably thinks the bills pay themselves. The person on the other end said something. I couldn't hear. Then Isla said, "Well, she did say we could make this our home. We're just ... settling in." I stepped back down the stairs. quietly, carefully. My hands were trembling, but not from anger. Not yet. What I felt then was something worse — shame for believing I was still wanted. For thinking that love meant anything more than convenience. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. That Matthew would never, but I couldn't lie to myself anymore. He knew. Of course he knew. You don't steal from someone you respect. You don't laugh about it afterward. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and wandered the house like a ghost. I ended up in the laundry room, folding things that didn't belong. Toomy tiny onesies, burp cloths, Isla's silk robe. That's when I saw it. A stack of mail on the shelf. Most of it was addressed to them, but there was one envelope near the bottom with my name. I opened it. It was from the tax office. I frowned. I hadn't received a paper notice in years. I'd opted for email. I sat down on the washing machine. And it was about the house. There had been a change in title. Registration, a new document had been filed. My name was still on IT, but now, so was Matthew's. Joint ownership, I read it twice. 3 times, I hadn't signed anything, not knowingly. I racked my brain for any paperwork, any form I might have glanced over. There had been so much happening in those weeks before the surgery. Papers to sign before the operation, medical forms, insurance documents, a form from Isla about something to do with the family file. I stood up dizzy. I went to my room, pulled the file box from under my bed, and flipped through the folders until I found it. The one Isla had handed me 2 months ago, with a smile and a pen, and the phrase just routine. It had a lot of pages, and somewhere near the bottom, signature line I hadn't noticed. I had signed it. I had signed everything. I sat on the floor for a long time. My legs went numb. I didn't move. They hadn't just used my card. They had used me, my trust, my love, my exhaustion, and I had given it, because that's what mothers do, don't they? We give, even when we shouldn't, even when it costs us everything. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I just stopped believing the door would open with kindness. Stopped thinking Matthew would see me not as a duty, not as a resource, but as his mother. Stopped pretending that family was the same as love. In the quiet hours before dawn, I opened the nightstand and took out the folder. I added the tax letter to it. I added the printed statements. Then I placed it all in a new envelope, sealed it, and wrote one word on the front: proof. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing. They would not be the ones to decide how this ended. I waited 3 more days, not because I was unsure, because I wanted the quiet to settle inside me. I wanted to feel the weight of it, the stillness, the ending that had already happened, even if they didn't know it yet. On the 3rd day, I made coffee. Just 1 cup. I didn't bake, didn't prepare anything, didn't try to soften the moment with kindness. I wore a cardigan I hadn't worn in years, pale lavender with tiny pearl buttons. Richard used to say it made me look like spring. I sat at the dining table and laid the envelope down in front of me. Matthew came in first. Hair uncombed, baby monitor in one hand, half awake. He glanced at me, then paused. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay?" I looked at him for a long time. He still had the same eyes, but they didn't see me anymore. "Not really. Can you ask Isla to join us?" He blinked. "She's resting. I'll wait." There must have been something in my tone, because he didn't argue. A few minutes later, Isla walked in, bathrobe tied loosely. Eyebrows arched like I was already inconveniencing her. She didn't. "Sit. Is everything all right?" I didn't answer. I just slid the envelope forward and tapped it once with my finger. Matthew picked it up. Opened it. His face changed slowly, like a photograph developing in reverse. From indifference to discomfort. Then to something harder to define. Isla leaned over his shoulder. There was a long silence. Finally, she said, "Where did you get this?" "From my bank," I replied calmly. "From my drawer." "From the counter where you left the receipt. You forgot to hide." Matthew looked up. Mom, this isn't. Don't lie to me. My voice was quiet, steady, but it cut through the room like a knife through silk. I know about the charges. I know about the title change. I know about everything. Ela crossed her arms. We didn't mean for it to be. I interrupted her. You didn't mean for me to find out. Another pause. Matthew set the papers down carefully, as though they might bite. You told me this house would always be mine, I said, voice trembling just once. You said you'd take care of me. He looked at the table. We are taking care of you. No, you're using me. My money. My name. My home. I saw something flicker in Isla's expression then, not regret. Not shame. Annoyance. As though I was being difficult. She said, look, we're doing what's best for our family. This was never meant to hurt you. Our family, I repeated softly. And I'm not part of that, she sighed. It's not about excluding you, but things have changed. You're just not as independent anymore. We've had to step in. Step in, I echoed. By making decisions behind my back? It wasn't like that, Matthew said quickly. You signed the forms. You said we could make this home ours. I signed what you gave me. I replied while I was recovering, while I trusted you. That's what you counted on. The room was still. Outside, the wind shook the leaves in the pear tree. I want you to understand something, I said. I am not confused. I am not frail. And I am not a burden. Isla raised an eyebrow. No one said you were, Kay? But her eyes gave her away, and I remembered. The words I'd overheard on the stairs. She's just a lot. She's always around. She's like having another kid here. A weight rose in my chest. I stood slowly, placed both hands on the table to steady myself. You two have made it very clear where I stand. You took from me, lied to me, laughed about it. Matthew opened his mouth, but no words came. I turned to him. I raised you to be kind, I said. To be honest? To stand up for people. What happened to that boy? He swallowed hard. I don't know. I believed him. Isla's face was unreadable now. Polished, professional. Cold. I continued. I am meeting with a lawyer next week, and a financial advisor. There are things I need to review. Things I need to undo. Matthew looked up sharply. You don't have to do that, but I will. I stepped closer, not out of threat, but out of finality. You stole from me. But worse than that, you made me feel invisible. Like I was. Something to be worked around. Isla said nothing. She just stared. Matthew looked down again. I took a slow breath. I will not fight. I will not scream. I will not beg. But make no mistake. This house, this name, this legacy, you don't get. To decide how it ends, I walked to the doorway, turned back once more. And one more thing, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. A mother never forgets how her child makes her feel. Not when they're 5, and not when they're 40. Then I left the room. I went outside and sat on the porch. The air was cool, the light soft. Somewhere nearby, a bird began to sing. Thought of Richard. I thought of the years we built together, one brick at a time. The way he always asked before moving a single chair. The way he called this house ours, never his. And I thought of that little boy who used to sit beside me on this very swing. Legs too short to touch the ground, asking what the clouds looked like. I didn't know if I'd ever see that version of him again. But I knew this. The version of me who tolerated being erased. She was gone. That night, I opened a drawer in the hall and pulled out the red folder I kept for important things. I added a note, a list. And then I made 2 phone calls. One to a lawyer. One to the bank. No one heard me. No one needed to. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do isn't to shout tits. Decide. It's funny how quickly things shift once you stop hoping for a change that will never come. The morning after, I made the calls. I woke early, earlier than I had in months. The sky was still soft with dawn, a pale gray pink stretching above the tree line. The house was silent, no footsteps, no murmurs from the baby monitor. No tension humming beneath the walls. just stillness. For the first time in weeks, I didn't check to see if they needed anything. I didn't make coffee for anyone but myself. I didn't peek into the nursery, didn't fold a towel that wasn't mine, didn't touch a single dish in the sink. I let their mess be their own. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my planner. It's an old pen with a cracked cap and the red folder I had started filling the night before. And I made a new list. Not groceries. It's not chores, but steps. One by one. Like a ladder out of a well. Step 1, lawyer. Step 2, remove Matthew from the title deed. Step 3, freeze and reissue personal bank cards. Step 4, change the beneficiaries on my accounts. Step 5, rewrite my will. That last one, I underlined twice it. Wasn't anger that pushed me forward. It wasn't vengeance. It was something simpler. Quieter. I had finally stopped waiting for them to treat me like family. Now, would treat myself like a person who mattered. Lorraine from church recommended lawyer Ms. Hargrove, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, who listened without flinching as I told her everything. She didn't gasp. She didn't look surprised. She just nodded and said, "Good thing you came in now. It's not too late." We sat together for over an hour. She went through every form, every transaction, every signature I'd handed over in blind trust. She highlighted the ones they'd used against me, and the ones that would help me take it all back. "You have options," she said. "It won't be comfortable, but it'll be clean." Clean? That word stayed with me that evening while they were out again. Anila, carrying the baby in that expensive wrap she'd charged to my account tie, stood in the doorway of what used to be Richard's study. The rocking chair was gone now, replaced by minimalist bookshelves and a framed quote about new beginnings. It wasn't mine anymore, but it would be soon. I went to the hall closet and pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a tangle of scarves, old photographs, the dusty envelope with my handwriting. Final wishes, it was time to update it. No more leaving things to those who had already taken. Too much, I changed the executors, removed Matthew's name from every page. Instead, I listed my cousin's son, Heon. He lived in a different province, barely knew him growing up, but he'd visited me last year, brought homemade soup, fixed my television, and listened when I talked. He had kind eyes. He would take care of what I left behind, if there was anything left. The next day, I went to the bank. The teller, young, polite, wearing too much cologne, walked me through the process of canceling my credit cards. I explained that there had been unauthorized charges. I kept my voice steady, not embarrassed, just firm. He offered to call someone from the fraud department. I said no, I'd handle it myself. He looked at my ID, then smiled faintly and said, "You remind me of my grandma. She doesn't let anyone mess with her either." I smiled back but didn't reply. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and untied my hair. I brushed it slowly, like I used to before Richard's business dinners. I applied a little lipstick, something I hadn't done in years. Not for anyone else. It's just to remember what I looked like when I was still mine. In the weeks that followed, I stopped leaving the door open behind me. Started locking my bedroom at night. Not out of fear, but as a line in the sand. I went to lunch with Lorraine, bought a new phone, changed the password on my email, opened a P.O. box, and redirected. My mail. Matthew noticed. He asked, "Is everything okay, Mom?" And I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Yes, everything's finally starting to be." He nodded, unsure. Isla didn't speak to me at all that week. One evening, as I watered the plants, I found the baby's blanket tossed on the floor of the porch. It's the one I'd knitted in those early daisy soft flannel, pale yellow, ducks stitched by hand. It was damp, crumpled near the planter as if it had been left and forgotten. I picked it up, brushed off the soil, and carried it inside. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in a donation bag, and tied the knot. Let them buy their own keepsakes. Let them build their world without the pieces I gave so freely. Later that month, the lawyer called. Everything was moving forward. The property would be restored to my name alone. My finances. 2, the will had been officially updated. And the best part? They didn't even know. Not yet. It was the first time in a long while. I felt the ground solid beneath my feet again. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not Lorraine, not the pastor, not the neighbors who waved politely from their porches. Because this wasn't a declaration, it was a reinvention, a quiet turning of the page. I started walking every morning, just a few blocks, slowly with a cane Richard once used. I stopped at the cafe on the corner and ordered tea. The girl behind the counter remembered my name after a week. Miss Adilla, she'd say, with a bright smile. The usual. Ah, I nodded. The usual. She didn't know anything about what had happened, but she saw me. And sometimes that's enough. The house stayed quiet. They were careful now, too careful. Whispers behind doors, tension in their footsteps. I caught Isla watching me more than once. Her eyes narrowed. Not with concern. With calculation, she must have known something had shifted. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of asking. I no longer flinched when she sighed. I didn't shrink when she moved past me. I didn't wait for permission to stand in my own kitchen, because the truth was, this had never been their house. It had always been mine. Now, paperwork would reflect that too. One night I sat by the fire and pulled out the old wooden box that held Matthew's letters from camp. I read them slowly, carefully, letting the words of a boy remind me that once he had known how to love me. I cried then, not because I wanted it back, but because I had finally stopped needing it. I wiped my eyes, made myself a cup of cardamom tea, and smiled for the first time in weeks, because in the ashes of what they'd done to me, something new had begun to grow. Not anger, not revenge, but clarity. And once you have that, there's no going back. Some people leave with a suitcase and a slam of the door. I didn't need either. I left quietly days before they even noticed. It began with a key, had a spare, of course, one they didn't know about. Not to the house, but to something older. A small apartment above the florist's shop downtown, where Richard and I used to go for anniversary bouquets. The florist's daughter, Noreen, now owned the place. When she heard what I was looking for, just a little space of my own, something peaceful, somewhere with good lights, she smiled and said, "I think I've got something that would suit you perfectly." She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Within a week, I had signed the lease, quietly, legally, fully in my name. I packed slowly, one drawer at a time. Nothing obvious. Just a sweater here, a stack of envelopes there, a photo, a scarf, my teacups, the silver spoons Richard's mother gave us. I left the rest behind. They could have the furniture, the towels, the matching sets of things they'd claimed. But the things that mattered, I took those with me in silence, no note. No confrontation, only space, one evening. While they were at Isla's cousin's for a dinner party I hadn't been invited to, I slipped out with my final bag. Lorraine helped me carry it. She didn't say much, just gave me a squeeze on the shoulder as she placed the last box in the trunk of her car. "You ready?" she asked. I looked back at the house one last time. The porch light was flickering. The curtains were drawn. I nodded. "I'm not leaving home," I said softly. "I'm leaving a place that stopped feeling like one." We drove in silence. The apartment smelled of lavender and old wood. It had a creaky floor and a slanted window overlooking the park. I placed my quilt on the bed, set up my favorite lamp, and made a pot of tea. I slept with a window open that night, breathing in the freedom-like air after rain. The next morning, I walked to the corner market, bought milk and biscuits, and returned to arrange my shelves the way I liked. No one moved my things. No one rolled their eyes at my routines. No one called me dramatic. I didn't call Matthew. I didn't leave a forwarding address. Instead, I let the silence grow. A week passed, then another. And then the phone calls began. At first, it was one voicemail, Matthew, his voice carefully light. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay." Then two more. "Hey, haven't seen you around. Everything all right?" The fourth voicemail cracked slightly at the edges. "Mom, can you call me back?" I says, some of your things are gone. Are you okay?" I didn't respond, because here's what they don't tell you. Silence can speak louder than anything. It makes people uneasy. It makes them question. It forces them to listen, and I had been quiet for far too long, just not in the way that counted by the second week. Isla left a message too. Her tone was clipped. "We noticed the car hasn't moved, and a lot of your stuff is missing. If this is about whatever that folder was, I think we should talk." Matthew's worried, but I wasn't, because by then the paperwork had cleared. The house title was mine again, fully and irrevocably. The bank cards had been reissued, the will rewritten, the passwords changed, and more than anything, the emotional lease had expired. I didn't owe them a response. They hadn't noticed me when I was in the room folding their laundry, refilling their sugar jar, making their life comfortable. Let them feel my absence. Now, let them try to explain it to the neighbors. Let them wonder why the groceries don't restock themselves anymore. By the third week, Matthew called again. "Mom, please just let us know. You're safe. Isla says this has gone too far. We can fix this." But it wasn't me who broke it. That was the truth they hadn't looked in the eye yet, and I'd stopped waiting for them too. I began building a new routine. Mondays, I visited the used bookstore down the street. They had a poetry section tucked into the back where the light always hit at an angle like a blessing. I sat there for hours, reading slowly, letting my breath steady. Tuesdays, I met Lorraine for lunch. We tried every soup in the cafe menu, one bowl at a time. She always paid. Said it was her turn to take care of me. Wednesdays, I stayed in, lit a candle, wrote in the journal I'd hidden away for years. I started recording everything not for revenge, but for memory, for truth, so that I'd never forget how it happened. Not the big betrayals, but the little ones. The way Isla sighed when I entered a room. The way Matthew looked away when I said something real. The way they made me disappear while still breathing the air I warmed Saturdays. I walked through the park. The leaves had begun to fall by then. The trees shed everything without apology. I envied them. How easily they let go. One evening, as I made tea, I saw a text come through. "Matthew, we're coming by the apartment. Please, just talk to us." I deleted it. Then I blocked the number, not out of spite, but because forgiveness is not the same as access. They had shown me what I meant to them when they thought I'd never leave. Now, they could live in that reality. I left behind no explanations, no trail to follow. They didn't know about the florist's daughter, or the little apartment above the shop, or the woman I was becoming in that quiet upstairs space. They had known the version of me who gave without question. They would not know the one who had finally taken herself back. A month after I left, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, from Matthew. He said he was sorry that he missed me, that Isla hadn't meant it the way it came out, that maybe they'd made some mistakes. But the part that stayed with me, the part I read twice, was this: "We didn't think you'd actually go." That was it, wasn't it? They thought I was rooted, tied, trapped by love, by guilt, by habit. They didn't understand that even the quietest woman will walk away once you make her feel like a ghost in her own life. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of the journal. I didn't write back because I wasn't gone. I was just somewhere. They couldn't follow, not unless they were willing to sit with the full weight of what they'd done. And somehow, I didn't think they would. I stood at the window that night, sipping tea, watching the lights across the park begin to glow. I didn't feel lonely. I felt free, and freedom, I've learned, is less about where you are and more about whose. No longer holding the map. A year is not so long, and yet it is everything. It passes slowly at first. You measure it by silence, by the days no one calls, by the sound of your own breathing as you stir sugar into your tea alone. Then, without warning, it begins to move faster. Your steps steady. Your spine straightens. Your thoughts no longer linger at the closed door of what used to be. It has been 12 months since I left. Not a dramatic exit. No suitcase wheeling behind me. No slammed doors or shouted truths. It's just one breath held for far too long and finally released. I live quietly now in the apartment above the florist's shop. The floor still creaks when I walk to the kitchen in the morning. The sunlight still streams through the slanted window like it's trying to write poetry across the floor. I have a chair by the window and a small wooden table where I read and write and drink my tea always with the same teacup. The one with the faded rim. It's Richard's favorite. I thought in the beginning that I'd cry more, that I'd wake up aching for what I left behind. But the truth is, I mourned all of it long before I ever packed a single bag. I had mourned their absence while they still lived down the hall. I had mourned the laughter that never reached me, the invitations never extended, the gratitude never given. I had been grieving while smiling, folding towels, baking muffins they didn't eat now. The grieving has stopped. I have not spoken to Matthew in 11 months. Not since the letter. He tried once more after that, a call from a blocked number I let ring until it went still. I don't know what he wanted to say. I only know that apologies, when born of consequence instead of conscience, hold no weight. Isla never tried. Not once. She knew. She always knew. I hear things through Lorraine now and then. They moved out of the house a few months ago. Too many bills, too many repairs. Matthew didn't qualify for the new mortgage on his own. They had to rent an apartment near Isle's mother. Poetic. Really, let her be the backdrop now. As for the house, it sits quiet, back under my name. I haven't gone back, not once. It's being cleaned, prepped for listing. A young family came to see it last week. The realtor said the wife cried when she saw the nursery, said she wanted to fill it with music and finger paintings. Good. Let it be filled with laughter again, just not theirs. I've donated most of what I owned. Gave the dining set to a shelter, the old record player to a local youth center. I kept the recipe box, and the scarf Richard bought me in Kashmir, the one I thought I'd lost years ago. Found folded between 2 pillowcases and the letters. Matthew's old letters from camp are still in my nightstand. Drawer. I don't read them anymore, but I don't throw them away either. They remind me of who I was. Oh, who he was. Of the space between. Sometimes, life can be measured by what you choose to carry and what you finally set down. I have not filled the empty spaces with noise. I have filled them with peace. There is a neighbor upstairs, Ms. Tabassum. Waters her plants at precisely 7 a.m. every morning and hums old songs from black and white films. She brings me mangoes when she has too many. I give her tea leaves in return. We don't talk about family. We don't need to. There is a quiet respect between 2 women who've survived the slow unkindness of being taken for granted. I have begun writing again, not for anyone else, just for me. Small pages, big thoughts. Memories arranged like stones along a riverbank, some smooth, some jagged, some I place gently. Others I throw as far as I can, and the baby. Sometimes I think of her. Wonder what she looks like now. What she will be told about me. If she will ever know that her grandmother made a quilt by hand while her fingers ached. Dreaming of a future where love would be simple. But I let that thought pass, because I am no longer a grandmother in their story, and I am no longer there. Burden in mine? I am not angry. I thought I would be. But the truth is, once you step outside the cycle, once you no longer seek approval, no longer beg to be seen, what remains is something softer. Not forgiveness, exactly, but release. A few weeks ago, I stood on my small balcony with a cup of tea, wrapped in my lavender cardigan. A little boy walked past with his mother, tugging on her coat, pointing at the flowers outside the shop. Look, Uma, he said. The petals look like stars. His mother smiled, kept pointing, giggling. And just for a moment, I imagined a different life. One where Matthew's child ran up those same stairs to see me. One where I taught her how to press cardamom pods open with her thumb. Where she sat on my lap and listened to stories about her grandfather, about the tree he planted, about the way he kissed my cheek when he thought I was asleep. But that life isn't mine. And that's all right, because the life I have now is honest, whole, quiet, and mine. This morning, I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph. The baby. 1 year old now. Sitting in a high chair with cake smeared across her cheeks. A tiny party hat tilted to one side. I stared at it for a long time. No note. Just the image. Perhaps it was Matthew's way of reaching out, of saying, here she is. I know you would have wanted to see her, but the strange thing was, why didn't cry? I didn't ache. I didn't even feel the pull of going back. Instead, I smiled. A small, steady smile. I placed the photo in a drawer, not on the fridge, not on the wall. Tucked away with the letters. A memory, not a door. Because I have learned something that took me 70 years to understand. There are people who will take all the love you give and never offer you a seat at the table. People who will speak over you, step around you, forget. You in the very house you built for them. But there is still life on the other side of that erasure. There is still joy. There is still breath and sunlight and laughter in your own voice. There is still you. And I am not just someone's mother, or burden, or background. I am the whole story. Final line, and in this quiet little upstairs apartment, where the petals fall like stars against the window pane, I am finally fully home. End of chapter 7. The Return to Self story, complete, approximately 11,200 words total. If you'd like, I can format this into a video script for voiceover narration, or prepare a version optimized for YouTube. Upload with chapter breaks and SEO tags. Just let me know. Toolschat.